Chapter 44, Wham, Bam, Thank You Man. The international pre-Olympic competition, every judoka has to lose 2 matches in order to be eliminated from the tournament. If you win, you advance. My team was absolutely petrified, and I mean petrified. They were petrified into stone, especially when they saw how enormous the Egyptians and the Moroccans were, who were training in the same room with us in the stadium. Egyptians had been the world champions for years under a Japanese Kodokan 7th degree instructor. They were scary as hell and very unfriendly. The South African team was big and scary also, but they were very friendly. They knew us. The French-speaking countries were tough as hell. The entire tournament was the official language territorial fight between the French, the English, and I always forget the other one. The French would not pronounce one word of English. Everything was announced 3 times. The matches began the first day. We got really trumped. Our prize heavyweight, Mr. Namibia bodybuilder, was slammed in 7 seconds after the Japanese command, Hajime! That begins every judo contest. Hein was the only fight worth watching, and he was arm-locked by a gigantic Moroccan in the 2nd minute of his first match. He would not admit it, but he was hurt very badly. 2 of my guys refused to fight the next day. They were so intimidated. I wasn't even told about this cowardly refusal and did not learn about it till much later. I thought they were actually physically injured as they shook their heads when they were called to the mat from the ready room by the loudspeaker, and I signaled to pass when their names were called to the mat to fight. We forfeited 2 places. They were injured all right. It was their cowardice and false pride from being so vocal about pretending to be politically tough and full of that macho South African patriotic bullshit. Tournaments have a way of sorting out the wheat from the chaff, and that was why I agreed to go to the All-African Games in Pretoria. I wanted to let my inexperienced, braggadocio Namibian team compete against real judo players from all over the world. The second day, Hein put up another good fight, but he was also beaten in the very last seconds. Things looked very, very bad for the Namibians. Frans, a Namibian government sports specialist who had been trained in judo in Cuba while he was in exile, was the next one up. He had been promoted to brown belt by the Cuban coach. He was our last fight on the second day. We had been seriously humbled in front of the whole wide world of judo. I sat on my assigned chair at the edge of the mat, as coaches do, and anticipated Frans would get a really good beating. He fought the entire time limit, and then, when the referee raised his hand for the final decision and pointed to Frans, we exploded. The entire stadium exploded in applause and stood in a standing ovation. The Namibians won their first international judo match. Ooh-rah! The crowd loved us. We arrived and we survived. As the tournament wound down for the 3rd day of semifinals and finals, everyone got social. Even the Moroccans and the Egyptians started smiling. We were invited to many African countries to compete, and I judged the trip to Pretoria, South Africa, as a huge success. We all returned triumphant to Swakopmund, and were totally committed to a dual match with Zambia, coached by the legendary Father Jude from Victoria Falls, the real Father Judo in Africa, and everybody called him Father Judo. One day, I heard of a new guy in Windhoek who had been trained for many years in the Kodokan Judo Training Center in Tokyo, Japan. He had been claiming to be a big game hunter from Italy and an Italian national judo champion and a 4th degree teacher of teachers in judo. I then heard later that he was visiting Swakop. I found him at the Swakop Casino and Hotel with a tourist hunting group. I loaned him my spare gi and convinced him to come out to our practice session and teach that night. He did. He really knew his judo. I was totally impressed. Work permits are virtually impossible for foreigners in Africa and other 3rd world countries. The theory being, if there's work to pay, then give it to the locals. I won my work permit by working for free, and it was well known I never took money from anyone for any work I ever performed in Namibia. He thought somehow he could be paid for teaching judo, and he offered to teach me. That was mistake number one for Enzo, the Italian. Mistake number two was taking me on as an opponent instead of as a friend. Hein was sold on Enzo's Japanese judo training techniques, and they soon found a way to work out together, and they worked a business together as tour guides together. I saw Hein distancing himself from me at practice sessions. Hein was no longer listening to me as a leader. One night, only Enzo and I showed up for practice at the Swakop dojo. I knew Enzo wanted a piece of me in the worst way. I always avoided the confrontation. At that time, I was 62, and that's not a great age to be taking on all comers. He bowed, and he said, "Randori, that's a free fight that we use in practice sessions." He was 30 years old, very large, in terrific shape, and very skilled. It is a regular judo custom that when a lower belt challenges you, you must fight or concede. "Sure," I said, smiling. I bowed back. He grabbed my gi and tried to throw me. We fought like two bulls for 10 minutes, with neither getting a clean throw. Finally, totally frustrated at not being able to teach a teacher, he stood back, took a real deep breath, and attacked me on my left side with those sotogari. Frankly, I saw it coming, but I was just too tired and too unprepared, and I went down hard. I did, and it hurt. I stood, smiled again, bowed, and thanked him for the judo lesson, and left the dojo. He was the new teacher. He beat me, so I quit. It wasn't long before the students started complaining to me about his teaching and training techniques. He was extremely rude and condescending to all the participants except his favorites, and they were very few. I continually refused to take over again. All masters know there can only be one judo master on the mat at a time. In 1 year as national leader, he destroyed absolutely everything that I had built. No one was training in Swakop anymore except for a few flunkies and his favorites. Plus, a cadre trained up at North at the team in the capital of Windhoek. He had heavyweight wrestlers from the University of Namibia. He had recruited them from the university. There was a national tournament. It was national tournament time again. This time it was organized by Enzo and his buddy up north in Windhoek, training at the University of Namibia. Nick and other judoka around the country begged me to return to coaching and to at least enter a Swakop team in the meet. Hein and the others following Enzo constantly belittled my decision to begin a brand new 2-month effort to train a field of beginners for this event. They were so confident in the Windhoek team winning. The older ones I had trained did not enter the tournament in order to give the ones they taught for the past year a chance at winning some of the medals, especially the wrestlers. Enzo was determined to make his point. I dragged guys and girls I knew off the streets. I trained them every single weekday in my own judo fighting style, which was represented by the words Bak Ju Kan, which are Japanese characters for simplicity, gentleness, and instinct. I have them tattooed on this arm. They're also on the wall behind you. That's the ones the Japanese made for me. My personally developed and adopted code of conduct was Bakjukan. I used it for fighting. I also use it as my personal style of living. I still do. During the day at the meet, judoka trained by me in Swakop were all winning their matches. Even the ladies won in the finals, and Swakop won every single medal in the tournament. I told Nick and our group from Swakop the night before the tournament, "Screw Enzo and his show-off ways. We'll fix his ass." I could teach fighting, and I knew it. Now everyone else in Namibia knew it, and no one could ever deny it. It was a beautifully victorious day for believers in the American fighting style. After the tournament, there was no argument from then on as who should teach and coach the national team. I privately committed to others to begin training a national team again. Enzo called a surprise national meeting, confidently forcing a vote. He lost. I won and returned to teaching again on the mats all around the country. Oh yeah, I forgot Enzo's mistake number 3. I forgot to tell you about Enzo and Hein's biggest mistake. In order to get paid under the table in Namibia, in the tourist guide business, like many other expats, Enzo needed a valid reason to get a visa stamp or a work permit. So early on, he and Hein set their sights on judo as his way. Very clever, huh? I knew it. It was obvious to me. I waited for my time to use my counter throw. Things settled down emotionally in the judo circles. One day they visited my home, all friendly-like, and they asked for my help. I always help when asked to help, as any decent sensei would. I knew Enzo could never get a work permit on his own without me conceding my head man spot to him officially. Hell, I knew all the ministers by now, and they all knew me. Hein insisted I write Enzo a personal recommendation endorsing him as the new head coach of the Namibian National Sports Council with a copy to the Namibian Ministry of Home Affairs. Both knew I would never refuse Hein anything. No matter what he asked, I would do it. I told them to construct it exactly the way they wanted it. I also told them to run it by a Namibian lawyer for format and suggestions. When I got the final draft back from Hein, I typed it on my own letterhead, signed it in front of them, and promised to mail a special delivery right away. What I did not tell them, the moment they exited, I added in handwriting at the end of the letter that Enzo was not now legally employed and expected to be paid somehow for his coaching services. Enzo was ordered to leave the country within 30 days or be arrested. I acted very surprised when I got that news from Hein, and I exclaimed, "Oh my God, you're kidding me. How could that have happened?" Always remember the well-worn principle. Old age and treachery can defeat youth and intelligence and arrogance any day of the week. Actually, in the end, I did Hein a favor. Enzo and Hein had split up the tourist business over the visa issue, and Hein ended up with Enzo's new SUV, which was their only valuable asset. If Hein ever reads this story, he might even thank me. Anyway, as we used to say in the United States Marine Corps, wham, bam, thank you, man.